Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Now, the state has, this is something very interesting, little responsibility towards the plantations and with respect to education, health, poverty alleviation and their employment. This is something which has been bothering people and the trade unions themselves and the workers for a very long time, and the state almost has abdicated its responsibility when it comes to people working in the plantations. There's very little that the state does, and nothing in fact. And outside the plantation system, of course, if you happen to be close to an urban area or on the fringe of an urban area, you sometimes get certain benefits which are there. But then in the plantations, some of these are just not provided at all. And in 1951, there was what is known as the Plantation Labor Act, under which so many do's and don'ts and things were there. And the fact that it was 1951 and some modifications have happened, but in general, it remains more or less just as it was. That is, the law as passed in the form of a Plantation Labor Act in 1951 still governs. You are familiar with this, no? Is there anything else which has happened after 1951? Nothing. Why? Why the state has almost abdicated its responsibility and they just don't bother about the plantations? Any idea? Anybody? Yeah, yes.
Is it because it functions like a mini feudal kind of a place, or some kind of an SEZ kind of thing, where the rules of that place is taken care of by the owner of the place, and there's a certain kind of, it's the plantation owner's responsibility to take care of his workers, and therefore the state abdicates responsibility.
Yes.
I don't know.
No, you're right. Go ahead, amplify.
So, since I think in many plantations that you mentioned line houses, right? That's provided by the plantation owner itself. I don't know if there are schools inside plantations.
So what is schools? No, creche is the maximum that they
provide.
Go to. Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever, there might be payment in kind of some kind also.
Yeah, sometimes. Some kind is also given to them.
So since many of these things are being taken care of by the employer or by the plantation owner, I think the state feels that they don't need to intervene.
Yes, anybody else who wants to add to that? Yeah, yes.
So, and one thing that I feel is that because the plantation worker, like, he's neither considered as a rural or an urban worker. So the disparity in that maybe is the reason why, like the state.
Yeah.
There are no policies like the state has like formulated or like studies being taken place because of this disparity.
Right.
Is it because of that? I'm not sure, sir.
Yeah. Yes. There is a mic here. Yeah.
Might be due to workers cannot organize themselves and pressurize the state to enact any new law because they are confined within the plantation. At other level, maybe the employee or the plantation owners may be controlling the politics, playing a major role in the state, functioning of the state.
Yeah, but one thing which is given in the plantation system is that trade unions are supposed to be present. Okay, in spite of that, it doesn't happen. But let me give you something from Assam. One of the districts in Assam, Dibrugarh district, it also has a university, in fact, Dibrugarh University, for quite some time was the highest revenue paying district in the country. And the whole thing came from tea. Okay. Now, Valparai in Tamil Nadu is also considered to be one of the districts which pays quite a lot. Is that right? Coimbatore, yeah. Valparai area. Valparai is not a district, or is it a district? Valparai is a district, I think. No. Okay. Taluk. Taluk, fine. Okay, Dibrugarh district was paying the highest revenue for a long time, and the whole thing came from tea. So that gives you an indication that the lobby is very strong. Okay, the planters lobby is very strong. In most places in South, you have got what is known as the UPASI, United Planters Association of South India, okay, and different places. And when I was doing this project and the seasonal migration of labor, in Coorg, they had organized a meeting for me with the Planters Association, and I was astounded by the kind of lifestyle that they have without visiting the place. I visited some of the places, just looking at them, the kind of lifestyle that they had was quite surprising. The kind of cars they used, the kind of dress they had, and then where was the whole thing coming from? It was coming from plantations, and the kind of life that the people who led in the plantations was so different. And therefore, the lobby has been so strong that the state, I think, has just given up its responsibility and doesn't want to ruffle the feathers. And the trade unions, unfortunately, also, everybody has been criticizing that in the plantation system, supposed to be an organized kind of a thing, still not much happens. Okay, so this is something. And then the law, which is still in existence, says A, B, C, D, these things have to be done, 1, 2, 3, 4 has to be done, but then most of it cannot be emphasized. Even the working hours, for instance, have not been regulated properly. And one of the things which happened in the Northeast was they had a separate time called plantation time or the estate time, which was different from what the rest of the country was using. And some of them went by that in terms of how many hours of work that people had to put in. The general criticism which comes when the people talk about the plantation system is that not much has changed. Okay, the implementation of the act is not effective, and the state hardly monitors it. So when you don't monitor, the question of enforcement does not come at all. So there's very little in terms of anybody monitoring. And one of the other experiences when I was doing this project was that in Chikmagalur, the local inspector of factories was supposed to take care of my travel and other things, and they had arranged certain things for me because I was working on behalf of the government of India at that time. And one thing which was surprising to me was that the person who was the factories inspector or whatever the designation which was there, he accompanied me because he had to get regular under the table contributions from the plantations which were there. So you have on the one hand the factories people, then you have the trade union, and then you have the owners, and then you have the workers. So each one has got a different kind of an interest, and there was very little you can do when you are working there. You just have to observe the things. There is no intervention which is possible because even people who have been working as trade unionists can't intervene in many of the cases, and sometimes the trade unionists are bought up by the employers or the plantation owners or the planters to an extent that they know where their interest lies. And the bargaining power of the labor in plantations is very low. And there are so many different factors as to why the bargaining power is so low. They just can't bargain because of the fact that some of them just don't have the capacity to do something in terms of bargaining. So they just go around with whatever is happening, and there's very little change which can happen in the plantations. And even today, if you take up different sectors where labor is there in the country, lowest paid sector happens to be the plantations, in spite of the fact that it's considered in courts an organized kind of a sector. So the plantation workers get very little in terms of the payment which is made. Now, the wage, if you look at it, there is a comparison made whereby in one of the more recent article, Khaka says that what they're getting, has computed the things and given some figures there. Those of you are interested can have a look at that. They get lower wages than what people in the MJ Neraga system are getting. And this is something which may come as a kind of a surprise, because MJ Neraga is considered as one of the most lowest paid, and they're paid for 180 days or something, right? Not or 100 days or something. Okay, 180 now. Okay, fine, 180 days. And whatever they're paid as daily wages, if you compute it and find out, look for the plantation workers, that's what they're getting is supposed to be lower than this. Read up Khaka's article, you will get the thing. And notwithstanding the presence of the unions, there has been little change in the economic, social, and cultural status of the plantation workers. Very little has changed, and the chances of certain things changing is again very low. And this study, which was done, comparative study, was some time back, but then on sporadic visits to the places, one finds that nothing much has changed, even if the comparative study in the 3 states was done some time back. If you go and look at the places, nothing has changed, and the labor lines remain the same, the working conditions remain the same, the creche or the absence of the creche is the same, and they're supposed to get a tea or coffee breaks which are there. Sometimes these breaks are not given to them, and lunch hour is curtailed. Okay, so nothing much has changed. I'm talking about a short period, but if you look at it even in terms of 2-3 generations, there's very little which is supposed to have changed in the cultural and economic, social, cultural life of the plantation. Now, this is some argument or some of the studies elsewhere show that the plantation systems in other places have undergone changes. And if you look at Mauritius, La Reunion Islands, and many places in the Caribbean, a lot of Indian indentured labor was taken there. And today what has happened is that this so-called, earlier was the the slave labor, ex-slaves or the slave labor which was there, and then the indentured labor. Some of them have become politically important people and gone up in the political hierarchy in those places, and some of them have very good important positions going right up to the head of the state in certain places like Mauritius, for instance. Therefore, the changes have come up in those places, but in Indian plantation systems, not much has changed. Now, Cuba is different compared to the other plantation economies in the same region as the Caribbean or Haiti, Guatemala, or even Central America. And this is something which is not highlighted in many studies, but then Cuba has been different for different reasons, of course. And prior to 1959, the Cuban sugar plantations also had the same kind of a thing, like coercion was there, low wages were there, and the other issues that affect plantation labor elsewhere were also there in Cuba. But subsequent to 1959, things have changed. Why? What happened in 1959? The Cuban Revolution. And as a result of the Cuban Revolution, things have changed. And to give you a different kind of a thing about Cuba, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this anthropologist called Oscar Lewis. He is known in anthropology for certain studies known as the culture of poverty studies. So his contention was that culture of poverty develops under certain conditions, and he has talked about what happens. Labor may be involved, lack of labor, poverty, different kinds of things. But then he said that when people live in those kind of conditions over a period of time, they develop a culture to combat poverty. And he calls that as the culture of poverty. And when he was talking about the culture of poverty, he said that one place where this has not happened is Cuba. Again, it's a different kind of a thing and kind of an aside, which goes well with the argument here that Cuba has been different. and he talks about certain conditions under which culture of poverty comes up, and he says these things can happen in different cultures where capitalist kind of system operates, but in Cuba it hasn't happened. So those of you who are interested can look at this. His name is Oscar Lewis, and the studies are known as Culture of Poverty, and he has got about 4 or 5 books which go into culture of poverty. One is Pedro Martinez, and there's one of the works which is there in South America, and he worked a lot in Mexico also. So all Spanish kind of areas where he worked, he developed this concept of culture of poverty to show that when people cannot participate in certain institutions of the larger society, they develop mechanisms to do that. Say for instance, you cannot go to the bank to get loans. You will have a different kind of a mechanism in the area that you live. For instance, what are known as the chits, for instance. So people develop that. And if you cannot go to the police, you develop your own system whereby you go to the mafia or do something. For instance, Godfather. Those of you who have seen the movie know that you cannot go to the police to do certain thing, and therefore you go to the Godfather. And therefore, he talks about different kinds of things which happen to the poor, and as a result of that kind of poverty in which you live for a couple of generations, or even one generation, you go through that, you develop a different kind of a system. And that, he says, is a culture which happens poverty. And this is quite interesting for those of you who are interested. Therefore, the year 1959 was quite important because of the fact that in 1959, the ownership of most of these things passed from private owners to the hands of the state. And that changed quite a lot in Cuba. And as a result of that, Cuban system has had a different kind of a thing, and there are quite a few criticisms, of course, about what happened in Cuba as a result of the so-called dictatorship under Fidel Castro. But then people who have visited there and those who have got first-hand experience, and Oscar Lewis had a first-hand experience, he talked positively about that. And also even today people feel that the best health system or health services which happen in Cuba. So how these things developed as a result of 1959 revolution is something very interesting. Now, as a kind of an aside or as a kind of a further reading, let me refer to a book called Recasting Caste. This is the 2015 or 16 publication by Sage, and the author is Hira Singh. And it's a very interesting kind of work. He is a social historian or sociologist at the York University in Toronto, Canada. And this book, Recasting Caste, he shows that what happens to indentured labor. And those of you who get, I'm sure it's there in your library, otherwise it's available, I think, even, all Amazon or Flipkart should be able to do that at a good rate. It's not too expensive, but I'm sure your library must be having it probably, because it's a 2015 or 16 publication. The interesting thing about the book is that he talks about what happened to indenture. He has worked in South Africa and the Caribbeans, and even went to the archives to find out the list of people who were recruited on different ships. And they were known as the jahazis. Jahaz is a word which is used in Hindi for a ship. So the jahazis and the lists, and there was a mandatory thing in the list called a list which said that at least 30% of the people should be women. So which meant that if 70 men were there, you would had 30 women. Okay, and this was supposed to be to wean the people away from, there are different kinds of terminologies, bad habits, all kinds of things and other things, but it is a very interesting thing to read. But then the most interesting thing that I am struck by is that he talks about what happened to this labor in different kinds of settings and all, and gradually they came out of labor, many of them, and as we looked at Mauritius and other places, they have come to politically powerful and other things. But the most interesting thing is what happened to caste and Hinduism. Over a period, they lost everything which had anything to do with caste. So, the caste system that you find based on the Chaturvarna, which is there in the mainland or in Hinduism, is completely absent among the plantation workers or the ex-indentured workers, but they have retained Hinduism. So, there are very interesting questions which come up as a result of that. Okay. Can Hinduism survive without caste? Because people argue that Hinduism is based only on caste, and because there is a caste system, it has constructed the Hindu system, or whatever kind of arguments you have. But then the argument which is raised by Hira Singh here is that caste may not be there, but Hinduism can still survive. Okay. So, this is something interesting because it will give you two things. One is to look at the sociology of caste and whether certain things are important or necessary, and the other thing is about what happens to indentured labor. And it's a very interesting book, and he had an earlier book again published by Sage on colonial peasants and colonial hegemony. That's on Rajasthan. That was his work when he was in India, and then later he has gone there and done very remarkable archival work in South Africa and other places where indentured labor was taken from the mainland, and he gives you the number of people who are on a particular ship and the caste and the village and the name of the person where those people were drawn. So, I have had some discussions with him on this, and it makes very interesting reading to go through this and find out. Okay. Now, questions. Yes. I don't know because I have not read anything on. Let's see, the laborers who went to Sri Lanka, to make it very clear to the others, in Sri Lanka you have different kinds of people. One is Sri Lankan Tamils, and they are also known as the Jaffna Tamils. Okay. They have nothing to do with the plantation labor. They call them as the Indian Tamils. Okay. So, the Jaffna Tamils have evolved in a completely different way from the Indian Tamils who are there, or I mean the workers, Sri Lanka, the workers who were there in the plantations. And I don't know because there has been a study of the plantation systems in Sri Lanka by Jairam and the others. They haven't raised the issue of the caste system which is there. They have looked at it only from the point of view of labor and class. I think they haven't looked at it from that. So, I will say that I am not aware of that. And then Ravinder Jain, R.K. Jain, who was a professor in JNU, has done work on plantation workers in Malaysia. Okay. And he also has done something at Sri Lanka. He also does not raise this issue about what has happened to caste among the peoples who have migrated. The first time that I came to know about this was when I read about Hira Singh's work, and I know him personally, in fact. Therefore, we have had lots of discussions on that. But one of the things Hira Singh has neglected is because I was going through the list that he has provided in the book in the appendix. There are a lot of Muslims. Okay. So, who are also there on the ships, sometimes 20 to 30% of the total people were Muslims. What happened to them subsequent to going to South Africa? He has no idea. He has looked at only from the point of view of the Hindus, and then he says that they have lost the caste, but they have retained Hinduism in some form or the other. Okay. So, this question of what happened to Sri Lankan, I don't know.
Some historian from West Bengal, he told most of the people who left Tamil Nadu are Dalits, who migrated to plantation.
Possible, because one of the statements I was making was that lower class also happened to be the lower caste in general in India, and the other side also is true. So, it's possible. But then when they were in the Indian towns or cities or Indian villages, they were in a multi-caste kind of a situation where they must have been exploited and must have had tough kind of a time in terms of exploitation and in terms of not having any privileges in the villages. So, going to the plantation system may in fact have liberated them in some way or the other, because there are no oppressors, there is nobody to exploit them, nobody to boss over them. This is just a conjecture offhand I am giving you, that life must have been better for them, even if they were plantation workers, without the exploitation from the higher castes.
The movie we saw from Bala, that we gave a different picture altogether.
Which movie?
That Bala had, director Bala had.
It's on plantation
on
workers?
plantation, yeah,
Where?
yeah.
In Sri Lanka?
Paradesi, yeah.
What
It's
is
about, it has a Christianity in it, and how they have been, they have been treated like a slave, migrated from colonial, during a colonial time.
What is the situation? Where?
They migrated from Tamil Nadu.
Tamil Nadu to Sri Lanka.
Yes, but he didn't picturize whether it's Sri Lanka, but it's a plantation.
No, I haven't seen the movie. In fact, I haven't seen a movie, only one movie during the last 36 years. Okay, and 36 years back I had seen Gandhi, and in between till today I saw one movie, and that was because of my interest in cricket, and that was Lagan. So I haven't seen movies. I don't watch TV. Okay.
But that movie
So
has a different layer in it, like they migrate from villages, they
Yeah.
escape from the problem here, and they migrate there.
See,
And
as a
then
social
they-
scientist, you should be able to imagine what could be true. Okay, it's possible. Even without going to the field or doing any empirical study, when you look at a situation, you should be able to anticipate and speculate as to what could be true. All right, and then one of my Jesuit friend who was with De Nobili College in Pune, he was trying to find out what could be true from the Bible. Okay, maybe the other religions will not allow people to do that. They give you all kinds of stories and you are just supposed to take it. Either you believe or don't. You don't question religion. Okay, either you believe or don't. So this person, he was a Jesuit priest, and he was trying to find out what is scientifically possible in when you read the Bible. Okay, therefore that's one side of it. But what I'm saying is that I haven't seen the movie, so the only thing I can say is that whatever has been picturized in the movie, you have seen the movie, is it? Okay, whatever has been picturized, you should be able to see whether it's true. Say for instance, in the plantation, if there were Christians, or if they were owners of the plantation and they were Christians, possibly they were oppressing them. It's possible. Okay, but then
It's like they migrate from rural Tamil Nadu to a plantation looking for a better livelihood.
yeah,
But again, there is a feudal system operates.
yes,
The estate was run by colonial administration.
yes,
And then you have, when there was a series of illness due to some epidemic breakout, then Christian missionaries comes there and convert them into.
yes.
This all, I don't know.
No, if you stay on the plantation all through, like in the Indian situation, that's true. But then the Mauritius, Caribbean and other places we are talking about is places where people have come out of the plantation system totally. Okay. So if they stay on, of course, the fact that they stay on means that they are being oppressed and exploited, and therefore they have to stay on there. Okay. In the other situation, like the Mauritius Prime Minister is an ex-person, and therefore many of them now, including this cricketer Alvin Kalicharan and the others, first thing they do is to come back to India and then try to go back to the roots and look for the villages that they came from. That's one of the things, and in fact it's become big business for a lot of people. They're paying a lot of money to trace their roots from where they came from, India. And a laborer who is still on a plantation will not be able to do that. Only if you have come out and gone to a different kind of a class, you will be looking for that kind of a thing. Therefore, what I'm talking about is based on the work of Hira Singh, where there's been a different kind of a transformation and people have come out of the labor, the plantation labor system and doing other things. But then in between what has happened is that they have lost caste completely. They don't know where to keep themselves over a period of time, 3-4 generations, and they didn't have any contact with the homeland as compared to the workers elsewhere today, including the people who are in the US and European countries and the Gulf. They today have a lot of connection with the homeland, and they keep coming and going back. Indentured labor for 100, 150 years had no connection at all. Once they left for good, more or less. And the promises were there for them to take them back to the thing, but maybe 1 or 2% or maybe 10% came back from indentured. Otherwise, all of them just stayed on. So some of them who have come out of indenture and taken up other kinds of things, they have had a different kind of a system. So what you are saying, the movie may be true. If they stayed on the plantation, the fact that they stayed on means that there was no escape.
Now we see lot of Assam, particularly girls, migrating from Assam to the manufacturing sector in Tirupur, Coimbatore. Are they working in the plantations, or it's some other community,
Not likely to be from the plantations. The plantation workers are not coming out to that extent. There might be some sporadic kind of a thing, but I have met people from Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura, Assam, and the other places coming from the northeast in different kind of thing. None of them that I have met so far is with the tea background.
So what the government is doing when these sort of exploitations are happening in the plantation estates?
They have the 1951 Plantation Labor Act, that's about it.
Yeah, they have an act, but still, they should ensure that it is happening or not. No.
Ideally, they should, but then, even in urban areas where, or look at what's happening in Delhi, the police are just standing alone when people are being killed. Therefore, in places like that, it's very difficult to keep a watch and ward kind of a thing. And therefore, the state has almost abdicated its responsibility and not doing anything.
So were they given these fundamental rights, the plantation workers?
On paper, yes, they have those rights, but then, as I said, everything gets flouted.
Would they be in census?
Yes.
Sometimes.
If they have gone there, they would be in census, and occupation they have to give. They must have given it as tea labor, possibly. Yes, relatively, in terms of wages and other facilities which are there, and not having child labor is one of the things which is there. Okay, the labor lines are better, the sanitation facilities are better, the health facilities which are given are better. So if you have a chance, look at this collected work which is there, tea plantation labor in India, where 3 of us have done the study. We make a complete kind of, we make a good comparison between the 3, West Bengal, Assam, and we couldn't find a person at that time to do Kerala, therefore 3 of us did only. So Tamil Nadu relatively is better, but that doesn't mean that they don't have problems in the plantations, but compared to Assam and West Bengal, yes. Assam is the worst, I would say. Where everything is much lower and at a lower rate compared to the other places.
Because tea, the nature of that plant itself is not suitable to accommodate into the plantation, because there is an argument, especially historians are working on that tea is a kind of indigenous plant. Like, it's a history says that it comes from China or something like that, but in Assam there was a kind of local variety of plant was there, which can be grown in a small scale landscape. So the plantation is a model which the Britishers imitated from the United States kind of cultivation and everything, which has created a lot of problem in terms of labor, in terms of crop, in terms of land distribution and everything.
Yeah. So what are you?
So my point is that, now the laborers, the small scale farmers, especially northeast in Assam, especially this Bodo region, people who have 3 acres or less than 3 acres, they organize themselves and try to challenge these sort of plantation kind of exploitations.
These are known as workers' cooperatives. Okay, so it has happened mostly in Bengal, where certain plantations were going to be closed down by certain people, certain planters, and therefore some of the people take up. In Tamil Nadu, I am not very sure, honestly, if workers' cooperatives have been tried out. It's possible. It's possible.
I went there.
Okay.
The John next to the he took me there. And
Yeah.
I tried to follow up a story, but
Yeah.
happened, but
Yeah. West Bengal, it has happened, and some of the workers' cooperatives have been quite successful in West Bengal. Okay, but I'm not sure of workers' cooperatives in Assam and Tamil Nadu or even Kerala. It may have happened, but it has not come to my notice, or I have not read anything on that. Okay, it's possible that it has happened, but then what I know about the success of the cooperatives, the workers' cooperatives, has been in Bengal.
I have a question. Basically, in Coorg, for instance, most of the coffee plantation owners are Coorgis, and they would come under the scheduled tribes, I think?
No.
No, they're not.
No, no. The Kurks are a community by themselves. They're quite different from the others. Sometimes they're categorized during the British period as the Kshatriyas because they were employed as they fought on behalf of the Raja and later the British. Therefore, they somehow got the Kshatriya status. But then Kurks don't have anything to do, the way I look at it, with Hinduism altogether. When they have marriages, death, birth, or any kind of ceremony, no priest comes there. They don't have any gods. They don't have any temples. The only thing that they do in terms of religion is what is known as ancestor propitiation. And they have for each lineage what is known as the Guru or Guru Karna, they call it. And they worship that person as an ancestor. That's about it. They have nothing to do with Hinduism otherwise. So any of their functions like marriage, death, ear piercing, nose piercing ceremony or anything which happens, one of the elders known as the Karvokara, he acts on behalf of that and does all the ceremonies or whatever is required. The influence of Hinduism has been there, but by themselves they are not. Okay. The name of the community is Kodavas. Okay, they are not a scheduled tribe, they don't belong anywhere, and then they don't have a separate existence because in the census they have been included under Hindus. Therefore, we don't have exact number in terms of their population. We don't have. Okay, and it used to be that Kurks owned quite a lot of coffee plantations, but not true anymore. We don't have statistics on that. Lot of outsiders, including Malayalis and Chettiars from Tamil Nadu, have gone and bought up. But then the biggest plantation holders are Tatas now. In tea, they have Glenlorna in Hudukeri, and then they have Consolidated Coffee based in a place called Polybetta. Okay, so the biggest landlords, I mean the biggest plantation owners are the Tatas. Okay. And there are some big planters among the Kurks themselves, but so are non-Kurks, non-Kodavas.
And another question that I had is in Valpare, in the tea estates, I think a lot of tribal people who live in small settlements, you can't go to their settlements without permission from the forest department because they want to preserve their
reserve forest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and many of like one of the places that I went to some years ago, they have about 30 houses, and that's a small tribal settlement. Somebody from the village comes to pick you up and guide you to the village where you speak to them, interview them and stuff like that. The thing is, they have a Sarva Siksha Abhiyan school there for up to 4th standard. And beyond that, there are no children. So there are very old people. There are plantation workers, as in women and men who work in the tea plantations in Valpare. But there are no children from the age group of, say, 5th standard till, I don't know, any teenagers or college-going students, because they all moved to the Valpare residential school for some time till 6th or 7th standard, and from there they moved to Kanchipuram or some other district close by to boarding residential schools run by the government. So what would happen to these children? They would definitely not come back to do their to the plantation work. And in that case, how do they get labor and stuff like that in place?
No, there is no problem about getting labor. People will find, if you have a plantation, you will find a way to get it somehow or the other. You will manage. Okay, but this is an unusual kind of a situation because in other plantations, normally the children don't have an option of going for higher schooling or something. They are in the creche, and after that, sometimes they become child labor. But then it's becoming different now. Okay, for instance, when I say that there is no child labor in Tamil Nadu, the children must be somewhere else. Okay, so this is something probably is happening during the last one generation or something. But prior to that, the picture that I gave has been more or less true. So what happens to these people is difficult to see unless you do a study now and find out.
I know, because what the elders who remain there say is that they are losing their stories and their culture and this thing. They don't know the songs that their previous generation used to sing about their origin stories, and the folklore and everything is getting lost.
Yes. Yeah.
It is exported to
Yeah.
Then there is no pressure from buyers from abroad to have a
No. Businessmen are there to maximize the profits. Okay, and not only that, textile industry and other kinds of things, Bangladesh, for instance, and other places, and the leather industry in the velour, for instance. The buyers where you export, they don't have much of a thing, and some of the top brands which are there, like Color Plus and the others, they have been accused of not bothering about what happens to the people, Levi's and all these people, okay. But they sometimes make some kind of a noise saying that give better conditions for them. But then also the question is whether they can actually physically or in other ways interfere, because like India they will say internal affairs, okay. Yeah.
So I want to know something about technology in plantation and labor. Like you said, there is no much technology in plantation, but maybe in like rubber plantation or something in other plantation.
Rubber also, I don't think there is much technology involved. What you do is to tap rubber, you have a particular way of clearing up certain part from the bark, and you have a container which contains it, okay. So, and in coffee you physically pick the beans, and in tea 2 leaves and a bud, you just break it with the hand. Therefore, the technology which comes in sometimes maybe in the form of sprinklers instead of, or pesticides which you do in some other way, okay. And sprinklers is one thing which has come up in most plantations, for instance. Earlier they used to do it by hand, the watering and the other thing. So that's the only thing which is there. Otherwise, there's not much of a scope for technology to come in, unless you're talking about the factories, okay. In the factory, different kinds of things can happen. For instance, in coffee, there is a, if you take the seeds and put it, there is a coffee grading machine. According to the color and texture of the coffee beans, it grades things into 7 or 8 categories, okay. The first 4 or 5 are the top ones which are there, and the 6, 7 goes to Nescafe, and you people enjoy the degraded 8th grade of coffee, okay, and you pay more for that, yes. So the top one goes to a different kind of a market altogether. So that's the technology which has come up in terms of grading coffee through the color and texture. Otherwise, on the plantation itself, I haven't seen much happening. And the same thing happens to tea. The dust which is strewn around goes into your tea bags of Taj Mahal and others, and you pay a lot for that. That's the degraded, unwanted kind of dust which is collected and put in the thing. That's the technology which is happening to some extent. But otherwise, on the plantations itself, also there's not much of a scope the way things are going. Okay, picking up the 2 leaves and a bud, even if you employ a machine, you physically have to go and cut it at a particular place. Okay, and picking the coffee beans again is the same kind of a thing. So, to my knowledge, the technology which can come is very minimal, or there's almost nothing. What was the other question? You had something else, is technology?
Like related to labor, like if there is technology, what is labor like impact or something?
No,
like
their living conditions haven't changed. The labor lines are more or less the same as they used to be 100 years back. So there's not much which has happened. And then the drying of the coffee or the other things may have changed a bit, but otherwise you saw the people sitting down and sorting out coffee manually. Yeah, there's not much of technology. Yes.
So, is there any particular health issues that affect people of particular plantations, like for example tea?
Yeah, I think so, but I haven't gone into the details. That's why I just mentioned that each sector may have a different kind of a health issue. Yeah. For instance, those who are in construction, for instance, dust and lung can be a bit of a problem. Okay, so sometimes the plantations may provide you good oxygen, but nothing else.
Sir, since they are working in plantations and without having any health and other facilities, death rate would be quite high,
Yes, if not exact mortality, morbidity would be high. treating of diseases, for instance, would be very low. The facilities don't exist for them, because the other problem is that if they don't go for work on a particular day, they lose the wages. So it's all connected that way, and to the extent possible, I think they may sometimes keep working in spite of the fact that the health is bad. Okay, and going to the hospital sometimes may mean one day trek to a nearest kind of a place. So it's possible that many of them just neglect till it happens, and sometimes it's possible that some of the doctors, if they are there, may help out to an extent. Yeah.
No, businessmen may, the managements or the entrepreneurs may think in these lines. No, that if a person works with a bad health, the quality of the product would be less.
Yeah,
so
they will also be paid less.
So the quality or the product would be gone. No,
that's right.
So don't they think in this line, so that if we provide health facilities, so that they would be the labor would be working in its full sense to produce a quality product. Do they think in such
No,
manner?
theoretically yes, but then what happens at the practical level, we haven't seen much happening.
See, now before India gained political independence, the colonizers used to have the plantations under their hands. Now, who's handling these in Tamil Nadu and Kerala? I told about in Karnataka, where the Tatas are owning much coffee plantations. What about these Tamil Nadu and Kerala? And do they have any political links, or are there any politicians who are running these plantations?
Yeah, see, one of the general things which happens is that when your economic power goes up, okay, or your economic status starts going up, one of the things normally happens is to acquire political power. So there's a concomitant kind of a thing which happens. As your economy goes up, at some point, at a critical point, you think that politically you should get into that. Okay, so most of the people, whether there is a company estates which are there or individuals who are there, they have political links. And some of the people who don't have political links directly, like the Tatas and the Birlas, have a few MPs who work for them. Therefore, it's not necessary that you directly do something, but you have other people employed for your company, they do the work for you. So it's not always necessary that the direct correlation between economy and political power will work. For instance, in the Palar Valley in Vellore, with the French Institute, we did a study under the UNESCO program called MOST. MOST is for Management of Social Transformations. Okay, so my job was to look at, as a result of the economy going up, what kind of social transformations have come in. Okay, so one of the things is, of course, language. I won't go into the detail, but then one thing which struck me was these people, most of them have got this thing called the leather industry. Okay, the upper caste people were completely or more or less absent from the leather work. And there was a kind of a vacuum where a lot of Muslims went into it. So most of the leather industry is controlled by the Muslims in the Palar Valley, Vellore district. Okay, but one thing which struck me during field work which I was doing was that many of them were not showing a political inclination. They did not get directly into politics. There were no Muslim MLAs from the leather industry, and they were not showing much interest in political activity, and that struck me as something odd. And I kept asking some of these very rich leather merchants all over Vellore, Vanembadi, and other Ambur and other places where I was doing field work, as to how come they have so much of money per numbed, as to so much of money they have, but why they have not got into politics. Because for me that was a logical kind of a thing. And nobody used to answer. They said, we are not interested, we are not interested. At one place near Pennambet, I met a person. There were Malayali Muslims who had shifted to Tamil Nadu quite some time back, and they controlled leather in that entire belt. And this person I was talking to was the only one who came straight forward and said that we don't need to do that. We have our MLAs who are paid by us, we will do whatever things we want. And they will raise the questions in the Tamil Nadu assembly. Why do we directly have to get into the thing? So, there are different ways in which the rich people have political power. It is not necessary that you do. Tata's, Birlas have never done that. The only person who tried was Reliance, Mukesh Ambani or Anil Ambani, who lost, I think. He tried to become an MP and he lost. But there have so many people who will just go to the ministry, go to any minister they want, anytime they want. From Bombay, one of the Ambanis will say 10 MPs to go to a particular ministry, they will go there.
Yeah, Mukesh Ambani is such type of fellow, no, basically.
Sorry?
Mukesh Ambani is such type of fellow, no, basically. Whatever he says.
Not only him, I mean, there are so many others who are like that. I'm just giving you examples as to how these people don't by themselves get into this. They have people who will work for them.
Whatever Mukesh Ambani says, no, any government in the center blindly follows.
So this is adding on to like what Preeti said, like regarding the health assets and tea plantations. So like in one of the readings that you gave, I found out that in the 1951 Plantation Act, it says that like this like sufficient gears have to be given to the workers who are spraying.
That is Virginia's Kaka's article. Yes.
So like so don't you think, sir, like
they don't. Nobody bothers because monitoring is not happening. I said,
yes, sir.
if monitoring happens, that implementation can happen. When monitoring does not happen, the question of implementation does not come in.
And also in the article says that like the labor department doesn't have enough sufficient staff to like
yes
to oversee such.
Yeah,
things.
it was not the factory; it was the labor. I made a mistake by saying factories inspector. It was the labor inspectors. Yeah.
And also, if at all the labor inspector visits a tea plantation, they mostly go to the manager's office.
Yes, that's what I said when I was taken around. This was in Hassan district, Hassan town, where I was staying, and then this person was supposed to escort me to a plantation, and he took me there, and then I was talking to the people there, and this chap was taking money from the thing. So it's fine. Yeah. So thank you very much.